Excellent. Welcome, everyone. We're excited to have you with us today for today's webinar. And just as we are waiting to get started, we usually give it just a minute for people to start joining. We do have two questions for you, one a little more casual and fun, and one more relevant to today's topic. So while we are waiting, we'd love to hear what it is about spring you're looking forward to, and what is your role within marketing, or what is your relationship to marketing within your organization? As well as where you're joining us from. It's always fun to see and hear where people are coming from. We are in the balmy Washington, D.C. Very nice. Finally not snowing. So that's a win for us. Love it. Warmer weather. Matt, I hear you. That's same. No,
Yes.
I'm seeing a trend. Yes. Are we all, I don't even think we're all in the same places and we're all experiencing the same feelings.
We're all just done with it.
Yes. Oh, flowers. Color. Oh, it's so nice. Summer and water. Oh my gosh, I'm so ready. Now I'm already ready for summer, guys. Skip spring. Let's go right to summer. Oh, taking dogs on walks, yes, without being freezing. And it sounds like helping with social and member engagement. And thank you. That is really helpful to hear just everyone's relationship with marketing in your organization to help frame what Amy will be presenting today. Excellent. Well, thank you all for sharing that daylight savings. Yes. Oh, so close. Well, as people are joining, feel free to continue to drop that in the chat. And just more officially, we'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, which is the Engagement Balancing Act, Rethinking Email and Social Media. And it is with our wonderful Institute faculty member, Amy Hager, IOM CAE, and she is the founder and CEO of Amy Hager Solutions. And just as a reminder, Institute is both a CAE and a CCE approved provider. So that means the Institute being on the call today, not watching the recording after, unfortunately, but being present on today's call does qualify you for 1 hour of CAE and 1 point of CCE credit. So if you are present on the call today, you can email after the webinar, and you have to email the IOM inbox. I'll drop that in the chat here. If you do message in the chat here, please send me the transcript. Unfortunately, we're not able to do it that way. We do need it through our IOM inbox. And both the recording of today's webinar and the presentation will be available after the webinar. Dropping here in the chat, just IOM at US Chamber after the webinar concludes for your transcript, your certificate that you were present today. And if you do have any questions throughout, we do invite you to drop those in the chat for Amy to answer as we're going. And now onto our main event, introducing Amy, our faculty member. Amy is a marketing mentor with a passion for small business and the community. And in 2006, she started as a member and volunteer at her local chamber, and her passion grew into a career with a variety of national associations, state chamber, and tourism organizations. And she still continues as a local member and volunteer. And when she's presenting and facilitating, she engages her audience to lead with new and achievable ideas, which I'm sure you'll see today, to improve your organizations and communities. And when she's not working with her nonprofit clients, being at conferences or coaching professionals, you can find her out and about, whether on her boat, at a winery, or exploring the world. So that's why Amy and I are friends. All of these things, like and subscribe.
All of the above.
Yes. Amy is a graduate of IOM and a faculty member of IOM, and also has earned her Certified Association Executive, her CAE credential. And with that said, I will turn it over to you, Amy, and thank you all for joining.
Thanks, Cece. And I gotta say, happy webinar anniversary. I guess I did a webinar 2 years ago with Cece, I think it was.
Yes, yes.
And it was your first. And so I
That's
just want to
right.
acknowledge an amazing job that you all are doing there at the Institute and how fun it is to work with you all. So thank you so much for being a part of the tribe.
Thank you.
Yay. Well, okay, we're going to dive in to a little bit of balancing act today. And I think the interesting part of how I like to dissect creating that balancing act is what I'm going to walk you through mostly. And so as we're going through this, if you have questions, please use that chat and ask me those questions. Cece, I can't actually see the chat the way I have my presentation up. So just go ahead and stop me. And I would love to kind of talk through some of these. And I'm using a couple examples of different audits that I've done for organizations over the years and just how I go through when I'm trying to develop my marketing strategy. And so I think the first place that I really want to start out with is, the expectation. And if you've ever been to my class at Institute, I get on my soapbox just for a hot second, because the expectation of marketing just frustrates me, to be honest. There's this expectation that we have to increase engagement, that we have to grow non-dues revenue, that we have to serve all the segments of our memberships and probably the non-members and the communities, and we have to be visible everywhere and do everything. And I think marketing really is a jack of all trades job, and there's a lot that we get asked of as marketing professionals. And the issue that I see, the issue that I experienced when I was at associations and chambers, is a lot of times we are asked to perform all of these and we have this high expectation, but we probably have fewer or even the same staff that we've had for the last 5 years, and we're asking our marketing people to continue to do more, when really I don't know that more is better. And so that's kind of what I want to go through today, is this notion of more is not better. And the problem isn't that, you don't know what to do. The problem is you can't do everything with the same intensity. And so I think the real question kind of becomes here is, how do we decide what actually deserves our attention as marketers? And I don't think that answer is going to be the same for every single one of you in this room today. It's going to be very different based off of your association or your chamber, your members, your community. And so how do we actually decide that? Because when everything is a priority, nothing is. And we all know that burnout feeling, that overwhelmed feeling, and that ongoing to-do list that we can just never seem to completely go through. And so I'm curious today, share in the chat, just with your gut, if you could cut one communication channel tomorrow, which would it be and why? I think that's an important piece here. And no filter, no judgment. If you want to cut Facebook because you don't like being on Facebook as a person, that's a why, my friend. So if you had to cut one communication tomorrow, which one would it be and why? So I'm gonna probably stop sharing my screen for a second so that way I can
and I can read it
see
out for you. So,
what the answers are.
Yeah. So Facebook does not seem relevant to the audience, and Instagram, we don't have a strong strategy there, and it feels aimless.
Yeah.
Some of what we're seeing.
Okay.
Facebook, nothing more said. Facebook, Instagram.
Okay. Yeah. I'm curious, would anybody want to cut out their newsletter? Or even something that they're using their email channel?
We just got
quarterly newsletter.
Yeah, I don't think anyone reads it.
Yeah, I totally get that. Oh, yeah. Private Facebook groups. They were really, really effective at one point in time, but I don't feel like they have been in the last few years. Ooh, Heather, I love that. Phone. That could be something that gets cut out based off of your organization. Quarterly magazine. Good. Okay. And again, this is all across the board. I never expect the answer to be the same for any of you. But again, how do we actually get to that point that we do cut something, and what makes the most sense to cut? So let me go ahead and get back to our slides here, because I want to dive into this deeper with you. You can go with something, and that's what I'm sharing right now, is an experiment that we did just off of gut. And this is what some of you are saying, cutting back on Facebook or cutting back on Instagram. At one organization, we cut back on all social media posting by 80%. And we also stopped paying to boost posts. And so it was interesting. It was just a gut intuition thing the staff was burnt out. There was not enough time to do the graphics and everything to really perform at the way that we wanted to. And so we were like, this just doesn't seem to be working, so we're just going to cut it. And lucky enough, it was true. When we went back and analyzed the data, the reach didn't change, even though we were posting 80% less. So we were still reaching the same number of people or amount of people, but we weren't posting as much. And so it was really interesting to just try that experiment kind of on our own without any true data to prove why we made that decision. And I think that's where a lot of this starts. It's not necessarily having the tools or the data to say, do this, don't do that. It really is where and when you are and where you're feeling some tension. And sometimes it goes really well, sometimes it doesn't. And I think that we've got to remember that, in all honesty, every single marketing campaign, every single marketing action we take is almost an experiment, because there is never a guarantee that it's actually going to work 100% the same way this time as it did last time, because there's so many contributing factors. And so after doing this social media experiment, which was just kind of a gut intuition thing, we decided, all right, we really needed to look at some data. And this is usually, now that I'm helping organizations do this, this is really where people usually reach out to me, because there's a lot of different data points that you can look at. And, I think data does give us that black and white permission to stop something. It gives us that permission to really focus on where we can do better. I'm always a big fan of, let's take what we did well and 10% better it and see if we can get better results. The algorithm game that the social media platforms change so frequently that it's very difficult to keep up with, it gives you permission to just kind of not follow that game anymore and to really serve your members instead of serving social media platforms or tech, to be honest with you. And so when we're doing an audit, there's usually 3 data points that I really kind of like to dive into. And then there is the emotional component of an audit. There's what the members' view of you, and also the staff's opinions, the staff's abilities. And so looking at the data or the engagement data from social media, from emails, all of that stuff, really diving into the analytics when it comes to like your website. And if you do have a CRM or a learning management platform, what are some of the analytics within there? And also looking at the buying patterns, which is actually my favorite part of this entire process. And so when we can combine all 5 of these parts of an audit to really then create a strategy that is unique for your organization and unique for your members and unique for your staff, that is the secret sauce, my friend. And so when I'm doing an audit, if there's been an experiment, like the example of the social media experiment, that's the first tool that I'm actually going to audit, because we've already felt comfortable experimenting with this tool. So why don't we do a little bit more playing to see if we can 10% better it? And so when I took the social media engagement and really started to dive into the data points, what I really noticed with this organization that did 80% less social media in 2024 is that should say one photo, not photos, overperformed anything else on their social media. They didn't need multiple photos. They didn't need videos. If there were links, then it really did not perform well. And if it was just text, like, no one touched it. So a single photo worked best on their social media. And so when we uncovered that, we instantly just implemented that. We didn't wait for the entire audit to be done. We had already done some experimenting. Why not do more experimenting? And also that started to save the staff time right away. And so We wanted to use the audit results though to figure out like, well, what types of photos? Is it photos of the members doing cool things? Is it headshots of the members? What photo particularly performs well and what do they want? But we at least knew that was part of what was going to be the overall strategy, is to stick to one photo with the social media posts. So the best performing, and I just said this, but I also wrote it out. The best performing communication really included that photo that had appreciation content, that shared success stories. They also liked action-oriented content. So like live at an event, if they were speaking on the hill or having a live event, having a photo of that event really, really performed well. And so that's what we just doubled down on. The next piece that usually I will go through an audit is the newsletter. And I used to work for what is now Higher Logic. It used to be Informs in their customer success team. I was a customer. I was one of their first customers to deploy a mobile-friendly email. I don't know if y'all remember back in the day, we had desktop-friendly emails and mobile-friendly emails. It wasn't responsive quite yet. And here's the thing that I'm seeing now in the newsletter platform space is the reporting is not as quality as it used to be. And so this organization, their average clicks for their newsletter was 6%, and their opens were at about 26%, which was a little bit low for industry average. But here's what I'm finding is because there's so many new spam bots, there's so many AI tools now that are looking at emails, it's reporting back, I'm going to say false data to your newsletter platform. And so right now with the newsletter that I'm running or that I'm a part of, we email twice weekly. I have the same 111 people who click and open every single email according to my data. I know about 30 of them. So I have asked, what AI tools are you using in your inbox? What kind of spam filters are you using? What kind of inbox are you using? And I'm really finding they're not actually reading anything that I'm sending them, and it's false data. And so I think as someone who's been in the industry for so long, it kind of is like, well, what data point do I go after now at this point if the newsletter reporting of opens and clicks can't be as true as it used to be because of the shift and the change in technology? And that also goes to the shift and change of social media algorithms. So there's a lot of things I think that play against us sometimes when we're looking at the data and we're trying to make these decisions. So
Amy, I just wanted to share a couple things from the chat real quick, if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Somebody mentioned this is awesome. I feel like I should be posting more than one photo, but now I see maybe it isn't that important as long as I'm still posting one. And then we do have a question. Did you grab the specific data from the social media platforms used, or did you hire someone or a company to perform the audit?
So I perform these audits for quite a few organizations. The social media example is from a client of mine. I've also done this though as the W-2 staff person, as the marketing director at an organization. So I usually, when I'm pulling this data, I will go into the reporting within the platform itself, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, MetaSuite, whatever it is. So I'm using to pull that data. I know with like HubSpot and all those other platforms that you can use as posting agents, they also are able to collect a lot of data as well. And so going in and pulling that data and comparing it across all platforms, and just because one photo worked well for this organization, I don't know if it's going to work well for your organization. It really is diving in and doing an audit and seeing. And there's multiple ways to kind of audit it. You could just go off of the engagement piece and call that a done deal because that's the easiest place. But if you want to go a few layers deep into more of the buying power, and that's where I really like to play, but that is pulling multiple sets of data and really kind of analyzing them. So don't take the example from today as the golden word of what you need to do. Take the example of today of we need to explore and figure out what is right for you to do. Is that helpful?
Yeah, they said thank you.
Yay. Okay,
And
thanks.
somebody did ask, what do you mean by buying patterns?
Oh, that's what I'm diving into next, my friend. Okay, so buying patterns. This is where I feel like I am a CSI agent investigating a murder or something, because I am pulling together all of the activities that are done. And that's social media, that's events, that's emails, that's personal reach out, that's phone calls, anything that is really done to attract a purchase needs to be audited. And this is where I think the next level of auditing your activities comes into, wow, this explains a lot. And we really need to be thinking through things differently instead of thinking through them intuitively. And so when I'm looking at buying patterns, like I said, I'm pulling when the purchases happen. And so I think a really great place to start is if you have like an annual meeting or kind of a larger event where you're going to have purchases that are kind of made over a longer period of time. And by doing this, by pulling when the purchases happen and then working backwards, what happened the day before that purchase happened? Was there an email? Was there social media? Was there maybe another event that this person had attended? And really looking and seeing, where did each of those ticket purchases happen, and giving an explanation to that purchase. And a lot of times what I'm finding when I'm doing buying pattern audits is general, and this, again, this is just where I'm finding across all the audits that I've done, general promotion emails really generate little registrations, at least from what I've seen. I've also noticed nothing is necessarily coming from social media posts when it comes to promoting an in-person event. And again, we would do post, any purchases? Nope. Maybe 2 days later, email, any purchases? Nope. And so what I feel are some of the more common buying patterns is when registrations come on the opening day of registration. It comes when there's some sort of deadline. So if you're doing early bird deadlines or the price is going up type deadlines or last chance to register deadlines, um, those are kind of the three big ones. But also I've noticed a lot of times if an in-person event promotes whatever the big thing is coming up, the next big priority, usually I'm seeing an increase within 48 hours of purchasing at that next event. And so a really great example, we're in, legislative season here in Virginia. We just had a bunch of Hill days. At Hill Day lunch, well, we now have an annual meeting coming up in April. At Hill Day lunch, the only thing that we promoted and we really wanted people to pay attention to was coming to our annual meeting in April. So that's what we talked about. And we gave them a deadline. Get back to your office. We were there on a Thursday. Get back to your office tomorrow, and please Monday, make sure that you register. And we saw an uptick by making a very direct ask and giving a very direct deadline of when we wanted to see people register. I think also if you have organizations in your membership where there is a specific person purchasing multiple tickets for your events or multiple things for the people within their organization, they need a separate message to them because they either need to get the yes or no from the person who attending. And so that messaging is going to be different than it would be probably to the one who's purchasing directly. So talking about how you segment your messages out and really targeting when you do know that there's a, office administrator or something along those lines who's purchasing large amounts of tickets for the entire staff, maybe they get a different tag in your database and they get a completely different email with a more direct deadline because they already know that they're going to have the typical 4 or 5 people go. It's just making sure that that data actually works in their calendar. So digging into the buying pattern data of your membership, and of your community really, really goes to show a lot on where you can focus your energy, where you can scale back on that energy, and how to approach getting buying happening within your organization compared to, all right, let's every single Monday talk about the annual meeting. And then, we do this on Tuesday and we do this on Wednesday. Consistency, I do think, is important in your marketing strategy. But when you can make decisions on how consistent you need to be based off of the buying patterns, that is just helping you, again, stay really, really focused. And also, it really helps if you know the buying pattern of your members is they are not going to buy until we send that last chance. Maybe you start bumping up your last chance to register for things, so it's not so close to the actual deadline. When you have, someone coming and running into your office or sending you that frantic email, oh my gosh, numbers are down, numbers are down, you know your buying patterns, and you can say, according to the last 5 years of data, people purchase the last 3 days when we send out the last chest registrations. Yes, we're mentioning this lightly on our email and in our newsletter and stuff like that, but we know all of our purchases are coming in, or 90% of the purchases are coming in on these 3 days. So it can also help you eliminate some of the fear that comes up for those who aren't in this day to day like you are, and who just think, oh, it's so easy to throw together an email and just send it out or make a social media post. So if you can really back up your strategy with the buying patterns and tie it back to the money, I feel like that wins any day overall, looking at the algorithms or the clicks or the opens and just making decisions there.
Yeah. And
So
Amy, we have a comment here, or I guess a question. So we have a chamber with a large membership, and many members tend to miss event registration deadlines. We accept them at the door for a higher price. What strategies or best practices do you recommend for encouraging timely signups while keeping members happy?
So, this is not a quick change, Isabella, but it does take some time to really train the members. And if you don't want them buying tickets on site, then, or last chance, then create those dates sooner and hold strong to those dates. Like, again, it's not going to happen instantly, but if you don't advertise that you can buy on site, or your end of close off date because of your hotel registration, whatever, is the 26th, but you want them in a week advance, maybe do 2 days before then, even further. So really setting those dates, communicating them clearly. And I've even seen organizations where they actually send calendar invites. And again, I'm not saying that this is something I recommend that should be industry wide, but even sending a calendar invite that reminds them to purchase annual meeting for whatever event by this date. So I think it takes time, but it really is. I think the rule of thumb used to be 7 times as many times as someone needed to hear something before it actually sunk in. And now it's 23 to 36 times when you look at the data that someone needs to hear something before it sinks in. So it really is constantly communicating and making sure that that important information is upfront. So if you don't want them registering at the door because that creates more of a pain in the butt for you all, then you need to start fading it out, and it's going to take a little bit of while. So, and I would also make sure that the price increase at the door is very substantial so that they have that motivation to buy earlier, and start training them on that price difference. It's $10 if you register now, or $50 if you show up at the door. So it's, again, there's not a hard and fast rule, I think, for anything that we're doing. But if we want to adjust the buying patterns or the buying habits, we really need to think through how can we strategically do that, and looking at your current buying habits and really trying to make some decisions and find some other patterns that you can kind of play with to really help change how they're doing things. And change doesn't happen quickly. It definitely takes time. All right, so I've got a couple more things. Boop, beep, boop. Okay. So the data points of an audit is very, very important, but I also think member input is really, really important. And a lot of times when I'm doing member input audits, people are more likely to speak freely with a consultant when it's approached about a strategic decision and strategic growth for the organization versus you as the staff person, because they're going to dump on you. So I do think that having an outside consultant, if you have a collaborator organization or a collaborator association or chamber where you frequently pull staff from each other to, do your board orientations or do some trainings and such, having someone that isn't a direct staff person do your member input interviews, I think gets you the best results. And again, this is from me doing this internally as the marketing or as the executive director of an organization, but also doing it externally for other organizations as a consultant or as a collaborator. And a lot of times what I find out when we're doing these is there is some confirmations that really happen about what the members really value. And so the member audit in this situation where they did the social media experiment first and then figured out that they could do it 80% less. When I interviewed the members, they really felt social media was actually a place for celebration, for celebrating people being promoted, celebrating at events, celebrating big wins for the industry. And they also were viewing the organization kind of as a media outlet to tell the news about the people in the membership, about the businesses within the membership. And so it was really interesting because I was like, well, if you're viewing this as, I'm going to say, a media outlet, then how and when do you know to register for things? And it really came when I already knew the buying data, it really came clear that the most direct emails with the deadlines is what worked best with this membership. And that, yes, email was preferred. They did not want phone calls. It was very hard to get these people on a phone with me, and it took probably triple the amount of time to actually get them on the phone compared to some of the other organizations. So that also was a clue that, all right, we don't need to be making phone calls to these people because they don't react to it, they don't want it. But also, they had really shared that the organization had too many resources. There was too much going on, so it was just creating too much noise, and they didn't know what to pay attention to. And so that also really helped us decide we needed to focus more on what the priorities are and start letting things go. And that's just like, that could be a whole nother webinar about how to decide what programs or what offerings to let go or to fold completely or fold into something or maybe give to another organization within the community. But it was really, really interesting that the member input audit gave us that information. And there were some similarities too when I did the staff interviews and really talked to the staff. They feel like they offer too many resources and they're spread too thin and there's too many things to try to get the members to enroll in. And so really talking about what is the purpose and the mission of the organization, and does this offering actually serve the members, or was it an idea that was added because we needed to create revenue or because we needed to do something else or because, COVID happened and we needed to pivot? So I think also really listening to are we focusing on too many initiatives and how can we scale back is such a fun question to play with. And that's usually what happens after we do a communications audit, is we really, really start thinking about what the offers are and where we're focusing our resources to our members and in the organization. So I think that member input, staff input, the emotional input to any audit is very, very important. It's how you're collecting it that sometimes can be a little tricky. And that's where you probably need to pull in somebody that isn't a staff person that can do really great interviews, that can ask the really tough questions, and that can also be very like middle of the road. Like you want the members to win and you want the organization to win. And so really there's no skin in the game of the person who's doing the interviews of what happens, besides we really want things to progress and move forward and for everyone to be able to perform their jobs so much better and for the members to be able to get what they really, really need and want out of the organization. So I want to go back to the first question kind of that I asked about, like, if you could cut one thing intuitively, what would that be? After really looking through what an audit can entail, how deep you can actually go, where you can get some false information, and where you can, also be kind of driven down a path that may not be a real path, especially if you're only looking at your clicks and your opens. I'm curious if there's one experiment you're willing to kind of commit to in the next 90 days. And if you have an event or if you have, something coming up that this experiment can be tied to, that that helps you focus in really then being able to pull the data points, tell the story, and that then can open the doors for more conversations on what needs to shift and change within your organization so that you can better communicate and better connect with your members. So it may be cutting back on a social media channel. It could be that as simple as changing the newsletter format. And I know some of you have said you've done things like that. It could be, again, not my favorite, but it's one to play with. It could be sending to the non-openers or the non-clickers an extra email to see if you can get some engagement going with your newsletter or with an event promotion. So I'm curious if what you were thinking at the beginning of today, and after thinking through an audit and kind of seeing all the different places you can go, is there an experiment that you think you can commit to in the next 90 days to kind of play with at your organization? I'm going to go ahead and come back so I can see what you guys are actually putting in the chat. So are there any experiments that you think you could be playing to? Okay, I like that, Ashley. Really reviewing the content that you've posted on social media to find out what actually is working. And it doesn't have to be a dumping ground. You don't have to put everything out on social media. But yeah, I think I think once you review that content and you see, let's say you do see that people respond really well to your events that are coming up, but they really don't, I don't know, care about the weekly tip that you're putting out or something, then that's something to play with. Maybe stop doing the weekly tip and only do the event promotion, right? The amount, Tammy, this is a really good one. The amount that is in your bi-weekly emails or your bi-weekly newsletters is a really good experiment to kind of play with. And especially if you're sending it bi-weekly. And the reason why I say 90 days is usually when you make a tweak, those first 30 days of something or those first few times that interacting, people really don't notice. Sometimes you do have those people that notice right away and they're probably going to say something to you. But really for you to see is if this experiment is working or not. I think a good 90-day trial is a great place to play. So Tammy, I'm curious, is there something that comes clearly to you that you would actually want to scale back? Like, what does scaling back actually mean for you and your organization? Is it, not putting as many events? Is it talking about events that are further out versus ones that are next week? So yeah, so define what scaling back actually means to you, Tammy, because that's where you're going to be able to get laser focused and not be so vague. Okay, so you're using a source for attendee photos and cross promoting this. So I think what it is that you're trying to do, Brian, is do the photos, I'm going to say probably of people, actually bring in some registrations or bring in more engagement versus, if you were posting just the event logo or the theme of the event. So I could kind of see where that definitely is going to be an experiment, Brian, of is having human faces versus the graphic or the design for an expo giving you more engagement. Okay, Tammy's going to think about the events. Got it. So Isabella knows that they have high success with Reels versus a monthly flyer or a monthly photo post. So that's exciting. And I think that, knowing that if you're having more success with one over the other, make sure you stop doing the other. That's sometimes the hardest part, right? Is we know Reels are doing really well, but we're still doing this monthly, photo flyer type post. Make sure that you don't do the things that don't work well. So I really like that. Okay, so yep, the real-time photos of hopefully creating FOMO for next year, but who knows, Brian? Maybe your members are viewing your social channels just as that organization that I used in this example, where it's more of a media source, more of a news outlet. Like, oh, look who is there. So they may not be viewing that and being like, oh gosh, I wish I could be there. Instead, they may be viewing it as, oh, look who is there. And if that is how your members are viewing your social media of, oh, look who is there, then how can you change your approach to the social media to use it in the way that your members want it to be used? That is the fun question to kind of play with, Brian. Oh, Gina, that is such a beautiful question. I'm so glad you asked it. So Gina asked a question about when you're doing member interviews, who do you decide to interview? How I like to break it down is I make sure that we interview like those uber over engaged members that, you almost could call them and they would do anything for you. You also want to interview new members, maybe who have just joined in the last like 30 to 60 days, and members who have been members for a very, very long time. And the other bucket that I really like to interview is the members who are not engaged, but we as a staff really think they should be engaged. And the questions are not all the same across the board. I think they really need to be very strategic and very thoughtful questions. But there are some questions that are going to be similar, like, how do you like to be communicated to? Is email the best? Is a phone call the best when it's something that we think is really important? So there are going to be questions that you ask those three groups that are very, very different. And then there are some general ones that you're going to want to ask to kind of see what is the answer across the board. Some other really fun groups that I like to interview is I'll look at age demographics as well. The younger member, the middle-aged member, the more senior member. Sometimes we'll go with racial demographics as well. If it's a community, sometimes we'll look at the geography of the city or the county and make sure that we have kind of a pool from there as well. And so looking at the number, let's say you have 100 members, I first like to start with interviewing about 10%. From that 10%, then I can refine my questions for the next 10%. So I always make sure that there's a little break in between so that way I can kind of look at the results, gather some thoughts, decide if these questions are actually effective questions and if they're giving me good answers, and also decide if there's different or more questions that need to be answered. So Gina, that was a really good one. Thank you so much. So start with 10% of your membership base. So if you have 100 members and you're going to want to find 10, right, to interview. and then probably do like another 10% on top of that. Let's see. Okay, so Brian's talking about how they've leveraged Facebook for interviews. And, one of the organizations that I work with right now, I've noticed interviews don't perform well. But another organization, they thrive in. And so instead of doing interviews at this other organization, we have really found like thought leadership performs really, really well over there. And so that's what we're running with. So again, there's not going to be one answer for every single one of you on today. But what I want to give you permission to do is experiment and say, this is for us or this isn't for us. There's no hard and fast rule to any of this. Very, very good questions. So, is there any outstanding questions that you have about looking at your data, doing an audit if you were wanting to tackle this in your own organization, or even if there's questions within your strategy? I think Isabella had a really great question earlier that you guys kind of helped a little bit within the chat, but is there any other questions? How often? Becca, that's a really, really great question. So I would say, as the marketer, I like to audit every 2-ish years, but I don't know that that is always within the time frame that we could actually do this in, right? And so there should be always review and reflect every single year on your data, on the numbers, but to really like dive deep, do the audit. If you're going more than 4 or 5 years without some sort of marketing communications audit, you may be falling behind with what your members really want, what the industry really needs. And so I would try to do it no less than every 5 years. I like every 2 years, but I know that that's not always the case. But whether you're able to do that deep audit or not, it is so critical for you to take time to reflect and look at your own data and do micro experiments, so that way you're not stuck doing the same thing over and over again for the sake of doing it the same way we've always done it. So great question, Becca. Just scrolling through here, the chat. So I would say if you can download this presentation once it's on the chamber website. If you use kind of those buckets of, and it's hard because not everyone is doing the exact same thing, but in general, most people are doing social media, most people are doing email marketing, looking at the buying patterns, the member input and the staff input, I say are the 5 bare minimum buckets that I would definitely be considering in an audit. There's some organizations that, if you think about ASAE and having a certification, looking at that certification data and looking at member data that is tied to that, I think would be really, really important. Sometimes I've worked with organizations or seen organizations where their membership goes up and down. And so looking at that data and looking at that trend and trying to understand that trend better to see how that can impact your marketing, your communications efforts, and where you may need to shift and change. And so it does kind of depend on what it is that you offer at your organization. But overall, I would say at least at a bare minimum, looking at your social media, your email efforts, your buying habits, your member interviews, and your staff. These are really great questions. You all are being so thoughtful today. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that is sitting on any of your hearts or your heads as we're wrapping up our time together today? I want to make sure you all get back to whatever you need to do at the top of the hour and that you have time to go to your next meetings. So is there anything else? Thanks, Ashley. Ooh, Brian, you're giving me good questions today. You're really working my brain. I love it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So image only emails. In order, I think, for image only emails to be successful, one, I do think you have to have some data on what types of inboxes you are sending to. If you are sending, I'm going to use Gmail. If you are sending to 90% Gmail people, I don't think you should use an image only email. But with an image only, you make sure that you have the alt text. And a lot of times too, with an image only, that is a landing or a click to maybe take to a video that doesn't obviously live in the email, because a lot of systems can't support video, that would maybe take to a YouTube channel or a social media place or wherever that video is living. But I think the important part is when you're structuring emails, especially with a lot of images, is to be utilizing that alt text. And a lot of times too, an old trick that works well is you can even type out some text in the same color as your background. Usually it's white, so that you still get that preview that shows up in someone's inbox. I don't think there's a single source out there for the ever-changing practices for emails, to be honest with you. I don't think there is one data point, Brian, that is pulling everything together. I do think there's some great industry reports out there. I know like Association Now's come out with things, Association Laboratories. Higher Logic will come out with quite a few things, and you can always subscribe to their emails and newsletters. Growth Zone. So if you look at like the email or the CRM or the LMS tools that you're using, sometimes they come out with kind of like that state of the industry type things, but also go to HubSpot and the for-profit side of the world and see what is being shared in some of those. But there isn't really necessarily, again, this is what makes our job so hard, because there's so many factors with all of the different technologies and all the different tools and how people use their things on personal, on work, etc., that it really does come down to the people that you can analyze are usually those that are within your database, those who are your members. And so really looking at that, ensure taking in consideration of what industry trends are and what external reports and things like that come out. But if you could create your own microsystem where you have your own reporting and your own data points, and you really are able to kind of gather that, that's going to make you a lot more powerful. Sprout Social is the word that I've been trying to think of. Thanks, Cece.
I got you.
I was like,
I was
there's
like, I know
another
it.
one out there, but HubSpot is the only one living in my brain today.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think another place too, that if you're doing podcasts or like a YouTube channel or anything along those lines, pulling from that data as well to really see what are people listening to, what are they watching, who are they, if you can get down into that type of data. That also needs to be an important part of your communications audit too, if you're using those types of channels. Wonderful. Well, if there's no other questions, then I say let's boogie on for the rest of our day.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. And thank you, Amy, so much for sharing. This has been so helpful. And I hope that everyone else got as much as I did. And honestly, feel free. I think, Amy, this stands that you would, you're open to questions if anyone has follow-up.
Oh, definitely.
Amy's a great resource and incredible faculty. We're so lucky to have her. And just as a reminder for those that weren't here at the start of the call, if you were on today's call throughout the webinar, you are eligible for CAE and CCE credit. And if you email the IOM inbox, and I'll drop that in the chat here, so IOM at US Chamber, just provide us your name and we will provide that certificate of attendance. And thank you all so much. And thank you again, Amy.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Have a lovely day.